So your name's on your do not packet because you're going to turn it in the other class. And we want to just get that out of the way now. Okay, your eyes should only be on your own paper.
Joseph. Huh? Oh, alright, sorry. I had to do something else first. Yeah. Alright.
You have 2 minutes left. And please make sure that your name's on your word. Do not packet it. Don't leave these blank if you're not sure. You have a minute left. You need to take your best guess in this next 30 seconds. That's actually a problem that we had on our last summit of people leaving multiple choice questions not answered. Okay, this is similar to a multiple choice question. Not answering it is the worst thing that you can do. So you got 20 seconds left to take your best guesses, and then we're going to move on. That is the time. Please take a look at your PowerPoint notes that you picked up on the way in. Okay, get those out in front of you. We won't do it again. Okay, so track me up here, please. Have your notes in front of you. We're going to get started with that in just a second. Today we're going to be talking about India and the independence movement in India, as well as something called partition. So we're going to be looking at Indians the Indian people, so people from India, not Native Americans, how did they gain their freedom from the British, and what happened to India shortly after that, which was called partition. Partition, we're going to look at it today. It means division. And India was divided into two countries shortly after it gained its independence, into Pakistan, which exists today, and India. Okay, so we're going to be looking at how that happened, and then later we're going to be practicing some claim writing. So since we have never done anything about this topic yet, you guys haven't read anything about it, we're going to do some PowerPoint notes to get us up to speed quickly, and then we're going to work on writing some claims for our DBQ practice. Okay, so there are some fill in the blanks here. We're going to go through these PowerPoint notes really fast because we have a lot to do today, and I don't want to spend too much time just doing the notes. But this is information that you're going to need. So just make sure everything that you're going to have to fill in on the screen is going to be in red. Okay, so when you see something in red, you should be writing right away. Okay. So before spring break, we looked at this picture, and it was a representation of the British Empire. It's called the British octopus. It's from a propaganda piece from Nazi Germany. And we can see from the picture all of the different legs of the octopus that spread out to parts of the world that Great Britain controlled at the time. And one of those colonies was India, which is right over here in kind of the southern part of Asia. India is considered to be a subcontinent, and so the British had control there. So here's some stuff for you to fill in red. Again, make sure that you're writing down quickly because we're going to go really fast. Okay. So Britain ruled India from about the early 1700s to 1947. So in 1947, that's a couple years after World War II ended. At that time, at the end of World War II, countries began to question themselves in the practice of having colonies. Okay, so countries that had colonies, they weren't sure if it was morally right to do that anymore. And they were also worried about the high cost and commitment to having colonies. So to control another country that is hundreds of miles away from your country, that costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of work. And countries like Britain were just deciding, is this really even worth it to be doing this? Like, do we need this colony? So that's going on. This is a really important slide here to talk about some of the demographics of India at the time of its independence. So it's going to become really important in just a second. I'll explain it. So we have a map here that says India demographic 1947. The demographic is a group of a population. So like you might classify people in the demographics based on their age, based on their race. In this case, we're looking based on religion. So we can see from India, all this part in the red and orange is Hindu-dominated parts of India. So people who practice Hinduism. And the green are people who practice Islam or Muslims. Okay? So we can see like in northern India, western India, you have a lot of Muslims. And the majority of the country is Hindu, practices Hinduism. Okay, so that's going to become really important, that separation of Hindus and Muslims, in just a second. Okay? So in 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed. And this group is a group of Indian nationals, or people from India. And their goal is to create democracy and independence from Britain. So they want to have their own democratic government where they elect their own officials. And they don't want to be controlled by England or Great Britain anymore. So this group claimed to represent all Indians, but most of the members of the group practiced Hindu. When I say most, I mean like almost all of the members of this Indian National Congress were Hindu. There were not very many Muslims. There were a few, but not many. So in response to this Indian National Congress that's mostly Hindu, the Muslim group in India forms their own league called the Muslim League in 1906, so about 20 years later. And their goal is to protect the rights and liberties of Muslims in India. Okay? At first, they claim that they want understanding between Muslims and Hindus in India. They discourage violence. But soon Muslims started to mistrust the Indian National Congress because it was mostly Hindu. And so they have a lot of very different ideas on how the government should be run. And the Muslims are just worried because there's so many more Hindus in India. So a couple other major events that led up to the Indian independence movement. One that's really interesting is World War I. So in World War I, Britain, which controls India at the time, promised self-rule or independence for India if they help to fight in the war. So Britain says, if you help us fight, you'll be an independent country. Gandhi, who we're going to talk about in just a second, supported the war so that India could have independence. And when the war ends, Britain went back on its promise. So remember they promised, they said, if you fight with us in World War I, you'll be a free country. When the war ended, they said, just kidding, you still belong to us. Okay, classic imperialist move. So another big event that happened shortly after the end of World War I, so in 1919, the Amritsar massacre. So massacres always, not always, but oftentimes happen right before a revolution, right? So you had the British government telling people of India that they were not allowed to gather in large groups to like protest or organize, right? So like your teachers on Friday, myself included, and Mrs. Wider, we went and we protested, right? At the Capitol, there was a big gathering, some students were there as well, right? So like that type of thing, Britain said you can't do that. Okay, the Indians did it anyway, and 379 of them were killed by British soldiers, and over 1,000 were wounded. Okay, so obviously that does not sit very well with the Indian people, right? Here's another picture of that. And so now more than ever, because of all these things that are happening, they were told that they were going to get their independence. They didn't get it. They're massacred, right? So independence movement begins. One of the key leaders here is Gandhi. So some of you may have heard of Gandhi before. He's super famous, really relatable to Martin Luther King. But he is a political and religious figure who was the key person to the Indian independence movement. And he fought against Britain using non-violence and non-cooperation. So basically, he refused to obey British laws that he felt were unfair to the Indian people. Okay? Also important here, Gandhi was Hindu, and he really preached and wanted unity with his fellow Indians who were Muslim. Okay, so he didn't want separation. He wanted everybody, Hindus, Muslims, and all Indian people to stand together to gain their independence. Okay? We're going to move on from this slide pretty quickly, but just another word for nonviolent protest would be civil disobedience. Okay, and that just means refusing to obey unjust laws and purposefully breaking them. So that was Gandhi's main tactic of fighting against the British, was the civil disobedience, or nonviolent disobeying those unfair laws. So Gandhi's two big goals were to have Muslim and Hindu unity, and then to defy the British without violence. Why is he so skinny? That's a good question. So one of the things that Gandhi did was go on hunger strikes. Okay, so that's another method of nonviolent protest. And also boycotting British goods. One of the laws that Gandhi felt needed to be disobeyed was this thing called the salt tax. So the British, kind of like the tea tax in US history, which you'll learn about next year, the British had a monopoly on salt, meaning that they were the only people in India who were allowed to produce and sell salt. Salt is something that everybody needs in order to survive. You and me and everybody else in the world, you have to have salt. The British made salt very expensive for the Indian people, and they weren't allowed to make their own salt. So what Gandhi did was he started with 78 of his followers, and he marched across India to the Indian Ocean. That's where salt comes from, right? The ocean, or not the only place, but main source, right? So he went there to protest and gather salt and start producing salt on their own. By the time that he got to the Indian Ocean, he had thousands and thousands of people with him. So he started with 78, and then they had thousands. So this event, the Salt March, was covered internationally, so all over the world they were reporting on what was happening in India and Britain. And it made Britain look really bad because Britain's supposed to be this place at this time in the early 30s that's like a democracy, a place that supports freedom, yet they're not allowing the Indian people to harvest their own raw materials. So it was really embarrassing for the British government. It leads them to want to give the Indian people their independence. Okay? They're more open to the idea now of giving them freedom and losing control. So we talked a little bit about Gandhi. This is Gandhi's kind of counterpart or opposite here, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So Gandhi, as we said, he was a Hindu, and there's a picture of Gandhi and Jinnah together down there in the bottom left corner. So Gandhi was Hindu, and Jinnah is Muslim. At first, they're working together. They both want unity for India. They want independence for India. But then they have a disagreement, and Jinnah decides to split from the Indian Congress, and he becomes very pro-Muslim, anti-Hindu. He wants to have separate countries or partition. So Jinnah starts to fear that Hindus are taking over India. Remember, there's many more Hindus in India than Muslims. And he supports the idea of an independent Muslim homeland called Pakistan. Okay? So he wants Muslims to have their own country called Pakistan and Indians to have their own country, India. So that's called partition. He wants partition, which means to divide up the country. Okay? Just worry about filling in this, this top part here. Don't worry about the bottom part. So the partition of India means separating it up. And he just wants to make it into Pakistan and India. So I already said that. Make sure you get it in your notes. Just the top part. So here's a map of what India looks like after the Partition Act is created. So you have India, the larger part. This is the Hindu part, and then you have two different countries that are made, or the same country, but you have West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Okay, so all of the Muslim people, or the majority of the Muslims, are going into West Pakistan. Okay, so you can see people migrating here from India to West and East Pakistan. And then Hindus from living in this region are going towards India. Okay? So as these two groups that at this point don't really like each other very much, there's two different countries now, people have to move. 12.5 billion people are displaced. India is the most populous country in the world, meaning that there's more people in India than anywhere else besides China. Sorry, second most populous country in the world. And so as these two groups are crossing paths, a lot of violence breaks out. And over 500,000 people are killed or injured from these two groups that, like I said, they don't like each other. Obviously, not every Muslim and Hindu person is going out, traveling and looking to fight each other, but you have extremists who do that, right? And hundreds of thousands of people get injured and killed. So then Gandhi eventually dies soon after that, so a year later after partition. Gandhi is assassinated, shot and killed by someone from his own religion. So Gandhi is Hindu and he was killed by a Hindu national. And the reason why he was killed was because he wanted peace between Muslims and Hindus. He wanted peace between Pakistan and India. And this extremist Hindu person didn't agree with that, and he shot him, and unfortunately Gandhi died. So this is still a conflict that's going on today. Pakistan and India are not good neighbors, and they fight over these two different regions right now, so Jammu and Kashmir. And so this is just a conflict that is not over, and there's still a lot of tension. Okay, so I know that was really quick PowerPoint notes. I'm sorry we don't have too much time to really discuss everything in detail. But that's some of the key context that you're going to need for the rest of our lesson today. So go ahead and look back at your do now packet. Okay, we're going to flip over to the next page here. So right where it says timeline, okay? So this short paragraph above the timeline is just a short, basically summary of the key points that I just said. We're going to read this together and then we're going to move on. Make sure that you're tracking and reading along as Brian is going to read. How about Brian? It's on the timeline, so that first paragraph. What's up there? Can you read it really loud for us, please? Can you read it a little bit louder, please? Yeah.
By the end of World War I in 1919, Indian leaders began fighting for independence from Great Britain. At this time, two major ethnic populations existed in India: Hindus, who were the great majority of Muslims, and Muslims, who were a minority. Many Hindus hoped that India would remain united once the British left, but some Muslims, especially leader Muhammad Ali, were not worried about being
A minority.
When the British left India in 1947, they divided the Indian subcontinent, creating an independent India and a new state called Pakistan. The Muslims recalled this division partition.
Alright, awesome. Thank you, Brian. We're going to come back to this timeline later. For now, we're going to move on. So you should be looking at this page here where we have our graphic organizer that we're going to use to look at a couple documents. So our guiding question for the rest of class is up here at the top. Gianna, can you read that for us, please?
Was India's partition plan a good decision given what people knew at the time?
Good. So as we're reading this document, or these documents, we're thinking about, does the author of the document think that partition was a good idea based on the information that they had at the time? Okay? We're going to read two different documents. The first one I'll read aloud and we'll look at it together. The second one y'all will do on your own, and then we're going to practice writing some claims. Okay? So our first document is from Jinnah. He's that Muslim leader that we were just talking about who wanted to partition India or divide India into two different countries. Okay? So we're looking at document A. So I'm going to read this aloud as I'm reading. Make sure that you are listening. And you should be ready to write and annotate on your paper. So I'll wait until I see everybody get there. Go ahead and flip over to the next page. Document A. Thank you. Okay. Document. You under? Okay. So as I'm reading, you should be underlining. You should be thinking about whether or not the author thinks that partition is a good plan, and underlining evidence that supports your reason. Okay? Brian, hey, what are we doing right now? Underlining what? Jameson, what are we doing right now? Hold on. Make sure that everybody can hear you, Jameson, please.
We're underlining evidence whether or not the
Right. Good. So we're underlining evidence of whether the author thinks partition is a good idea or a bad idea. Okay, get your pencil ready to go. Okay. Starting with the source information here, the passage below is a speech by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. We just talked about who he was, who is known as the founder of Pakistan. Jinnah served as president of the All India Muslim League from 1913 until Pakistan's independence on August 15, 1947. The speech became known as the Two Nations Speech and was delivered at the Muslim League's annual meeting in 1940. Nice job to Brian, who's underlined that key information. Okay. If the British government really wants to secure peace and happiness of the people of this subcontinent, the only course open to us is to allow Hindus and Muslims to separate homelands. Nice Nice job, Jameson, for underlining that key point. The only course is to allow Hindus and Muslims to separate home. Nice job, Rossi. By dividing India into autonomous, autonomous means separate. Let's go ahead and annotate that. Autonomous means separate. Separate national states. It is extremely difficult to appreciate why our Hindu friends fail to understand the real nature of Islam and Hinduism. They are not religions in the strict sense of the word, but are in fact different and distinct social orders. It is a dream that Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality. I'm going to read that one more time. It is a dream that Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality. Think about that quote for a second and silently in your head. What does that mean when the author says it's a dream that Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality? Okay. Andre, what does it mean when the author says it's a dream that Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality?
It means that it's only people's imaginations, and in true graphic reality that is simply not possible.
Perfect. So he's saying that it's not possible for these two different religions to live together. Okay, keep it going. This misconception of one Indian nation has gone far beyond the limits and the cause of most of our troubles that will lead to India to destruction. If we fail to revise our notions in time, the Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, and literature. They neither intermarry nor interdine together, and indeed they belong to two different civilizations, which are based mainly on conflicting ideas and conception. To yoke together, or to join together, two such nations under a single state, as one numerical minority and the other as a majority, must lead to growing discontent and the final destruction of the government of such a state. Muslim India cannot accept any constitution that will lead to a Hindu majority government. The Muslims are a nation according to any definition of a nation, and they must have their homelands, their territory, and their state. We wish to live in peace and harmony with our neighbors as free and independent people. Okay, let's go back to our graphic organizer for a second. So the first thing that we're doing is we're deciding whether or not the author thinks the partition plan is a good decision. Okay, show me with your thumbs. Was it a good decision, thumbs up, or a bad decision according to this author? I want to see everybody's thumbs going up or down. Okay. Jameson, why do you think it is a bad decision?
I said it was a bad decision because he thinks that they should be separated from each other. And on the second class paragraph, it says Muslim India second
Okay. Danny, why do you think it is a medium? Why do you think the other thinks it's kind of good but also kind of bad?
So the author has logic based on having two different nationalities. Sometimes having different ideals can get into conflicts easily. When you believe in one thing, you can't really see the truth of the other. But I also think that he can't really foresee the future, and you can't really know until he tries. So I'm excited.
Alright, you said it's a good decision, right?
Yeah.
Okay, why does the other think it's a good decision?
Because Muslims are a majority. Minority. Yeah, because Muslims are a minority in this place, and any representation, any law that is drafted in order to give more representation to the Muslims is just going to anger the majority, because they're going to think that they're not getting any representation, and in turn, it's just going to cause even more conflict between them. So partition is a good idea because first of all, it puts two completely different, irreconcilable visions of a people in a separate place, but it still keeps everyone.
Yeah, so Jameson, the evidence that you pulled out earlier where he says that Muslim India cannot accept any constitution that will lead to a Hindu majority government. The author is Muslim, right? And he's saying that he he will not accept the government that the Muslims are not in control, right? So as from the author's point of view, he thinks it's a good idea. So everybody in this box here, does the author think it's a good idea? You're writing yes. Okay? What I want you to do now is go back through document A, and you're going to pull out 1 to 2 pieces of evidence. Let's shoot for 2, but if you just get 1, that's fine. 1 to 2 pieces of evidence that support his claim. Okay, so why does the author say that it's a good idea? 2 pieces of evidence. You can either paraphrase what the author is saying, or take a direct quote, and you're writing it in that box now. Okay. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go through document B, and you're going to do the same thing. So does the author think that partition is a good idea or a bad idea? Yes or no? You're coming up with 1 to 2 pieces of evidence for why the author agrees or disagrees with partition for document B. Okay, so make sure that you start with the source information as you read. You're thinking, does the author think that dividing India into 2 countries is a good idea? Okay, you should be underlining evidence that supports if he says yes or no. Minutes left. done, you can start doing the same thing for documents C and D. We've got 2 minutes left. So if you've already filled in evidence and picked a side for document B, you can move on to C and D. So it looked like the majority of us said that the author thinks it's a bad idea to do partition. Okay? Let's see, Victor's shaking his head. You guys are right, it is a bad idea. Victor, what's one piece of evidence that you pulled out that makes it think that it's a bad idea?
The economic aspects of separation are clear, it's clear that we need as a very strong.
So economic reasons, I'm just going to write that up here for short. And that's the big one that he talks about, right? Economic reasons. And Muslims will be worse off than Hindus, right? Okay. I'm sure most of you had a piece of evidence that was very similar to that because that was really the main idea of that section, that topic. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to write a claim, a really strong claim that you would use on your DDQ using evidence. Okay? So on the very back of your packet, the last page, you have some of our key points for effective claims. Okay? So take a look at that. So when we're writing a claim, right, this is something that would go in your introduction paragraph, like towards the end of the introduction paragraph, after your historical context or background information. We want our claims to, number one, restate the prompt. Okay? So we're going to put the prompt like back in our own words. If the prompt's a question, we're going to make it a statement. We're going to answer all parts of the prompt, number two. Okay, so we have to answer the prompt in our claim. And then number three, we're going to support our claim with clear, understandable, and historically defensible reasons. Okay? So that means that if I am a person who has never read anything about India or the independence of India, when I read your claim, I'm going to know exactly why you think that partition is a good or a bad idea. Okay, it's going to be understandable, and it's going to be historically defensible, meaning that you're not just going to make something up. Like the partition agreement was bad because then Santa Claus wouldn't come to Pakistan and they wouldn't get presents there, right? That has nothing to do with history. You're going to make it, you're going to base your evidence or support your claim with historical facts, right? Like the economy of the Muslim people would be hurt if they split into halves. Okay? So go back to your graphic organizer that we were just working on, where it says round one. So here's an example of a claim that would include those three key points. Okay, make sure that you are tracking the board at this time. You're not going to write this down, but this is an example of what you're going to do in just a minute. Okay? What? This is one side of the argument. This is correct for one side. Okay, so what I did here, guys, was I answered this claim, which remember our prompt was, what was India's partition plan a good decision given what people knew at the time? I took the side of yes, it's a good idea. Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm just using it as an example. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do when I write my claim is I'm going to restate the prompt like I did here. So I wrote, given what people knew at the time, taking words directly from the prompt, right? India's partition plan. Okay, and now I'm going to choose a side, or I'm going to answer that prompt. I said it was a good idea, or it was a good decision, period. Your claim is going to be like 1 to 2 sentences. Okay? Now I'm going to follow up my claim with a supporting reason that's clear and historically defensible. So I wrote, it was not a good, or sorry, it was a good decision because if they did not divide the country, Muslims would have been become a minority in the Hindu-dominated government. Okay? So it's clear I'm telling you why I think it's a good idea, and I'm giving you a reason that's historically defensible because Hindus were the majority, Muslims were worried about being in a government where they would be the minority. Okay? What you're going to do now is you're going to write your own claim, but you're going to take the side of no. So you're going to say that partition is a bad idea, and you're going to give a supporting reason why. Okay? So in your claims, if you forget, right, you have on the back your key points. You want to make sure that you're restating the prompt, answering all parts of the prompt, and supporting with clear, understandable, and historically defensible reasons. So instead of saying it's a good idea like I did, you're going to say that it was a bad idea. So you should be using evidence or paraphrased evidence to support your claim from document B. Okay? Go ahead and get started with that. I see Gianna's already gotten started writing. If you need to look back at document B, that's fine. You have 5 minutes to do it on your own. If you want, you can watch it.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so 5 minutes, you're writing your own claim. Here we go. I'm going to leave my example up here. Okay? Use this to help you in writing your own. A little more than 3 minutes left. Remember, you should be saying the prompt. Answering the prompt, you're saying that it was a bad idea, and providing evidence from the document. Okay, go ahead and stop wherever you're at, and And let's take a look at a couple of quick examples, okay? So, before I show the student work up on the board, I want to make sure that we're clear that we are all learning together. Nobody's here I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad up here. I just want to show some work so that we can learn from each other and get better together, okay? So, take a look up here on the board. Okay, so let's look at this one first. It says, make sure that you're tracking on the screen, please. Around the cup. India's partition plan was not a good idea. Does that statement restate the entire prompt, yes or no? Brian, it doesn't? What part is it missing? What? It doesn't restate the entire prompt, right? So what is it missing from the prompt? Given what people knew at the time, okay? So that's like a nitpicky thing, but we want to make sure that we are restating all parts of the prompt, not just some of the prompt, right? So the prompt said given what people knew at the time, we want to include that in our response, okay? Does it answer the claim, or does it answer the prompt? Yes or no? What do you guys think? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes, 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 yes. Good. It does answer the prompt, right? It says not a good idea, okay? This is the case because partition would only focus on the Muslim minority while neglecting other minorities, which would have caused even more turmoil. Okay? Is that historically defensible and clear? I'd say, yeah. It's historically defensible. They talk about the Sikhs in the prompt, which is a different minority, so I would give it that. Okay, here's another one. No, it wasn't a good decision. Does this restate the prompt, yes or no? It does not restate the prompt. Does it answer the prompt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would make sure that we're saying no, partition wasn't a good decision. Right, not it, you want to be specific. Okay? Why I say this is because there's no separation, then they would lose money and there would be regular fights. Okay? Muslim areas, on the other hand, will be economically backwards. Okay, I would give this historically defensible because they're talking about a piece of evidence from the text, right, that Muslims would be economically less off than Hindus. Okay? So we just want to make sure that we are restating the prompt, right? Entirely, okay, in full. And finally, we're going to look at one more. So, given what people knew at the time, India's partition plan was not a good idea. Okay, given what people knew at the time, India's partition plan was not a good idea. Does it restate the entire prompt, yes or no?
Yes.
It does. Does it answer the prompt?
Yes.
Yep, it says it's a bad decision. Okay, and then supporting reason. It was a bad decision because of the weak economy and the amount of turmoil it would create for the Muslims. Historically defensible? Good. Okay, I think we made it a little bit more clear, right? But just overall, really good. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give these back to the people that gave them. I want you to look at the claim that you wrote. Revise it if you need to. If you feel like your claim is awesome, I want you to move on to your mastery check, which is on the very last page. Hey, listen up. If you think that your claim is perfect, I'm going to come by and give you a check. Okay? Otherwise, I'm going to give you guys some different feedback. Okay, here you go. Okay, so I'm going to come around and check your prompts that or your claims that you just wrote. If it's perfect, I'm going to give you a check and you're going to move on to your mastery check. Okay? If I give you an R, that means you need to go back and restate the prompt. If I give you an A, it means you need to answer the prompt. If I give you an S, you need a supporting reason. Okay? You need to clarify or make your supporting reason historically accurate. Okay? So, you're good. Just I'm going to come to Jameson and Dan next, okay? And tell me guys what. This is good. Awesome. So, two of those things. Text, information. That's Okay, folks, nice job today. Make sure that your name is on your packet. You're going to turn it into the gold bin before you leave. It's now 10:40, so you all are free to go. You can keep the PowerPoint notes, but turn in your do now packet from today. There's no homework tonight. Enjoy your weekend.